The NBA might want to rethink this. Hello, I'm Emmett Ryan, and welcome to Ball in Europe. And today, finally, we're discussing the much discussed, despite being low in detail, plans for the NBA to expand into Europe. You know, where I live, where I am right now. And, well, there's a lot to get through, but mainly the purpose of this video is to look at sort of the key things that are kind of not being discussed out loud, which could be major stumbling blocks towards any NBA project succeeding in Europe, some of which go beyond basketball, to be entirely honest. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. And now, let's get to it. Football is really, really big, like really big in Europe. For US viewers, I'm referring to soccer. For US viewers who knew that already, I'm really sorry. So, when I say big, there's also relevance in terms of that. So we have seen attempts by football clubs in Europe to go into other sports before at a very small level. British fans will know, maybe, that Rangers were briefly, it's Glasgow Rangers in Scotland, were briefly in the old British League, a different name to Super League basketball back then, and then stopped because of a reason we're going to get to with everybody. We've also seen league teams try it out with touring cars and racing. We've seen many European football clubs invest in, basically the Formula International series around football clubs. I've even forgotten what it was called, but there was one based around football clubs. And the common issue always is stakeholder interest in the primary property, which is the football club. So you look, say, at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Tottenham fans love what Spurs do with the stadium, or should at least, because their entire focus with the not football activity is generating revenue that can go back into the football club and increase the overall money Tottenham have to spend. And that's great. What they would not be happy with is then if Spurs said, by the way, that real reason we're making that money is so we can start Spurs volleyball, and we're also going to take some money away from the football budget for that. Same goes for basketball, same goes for everything else. So England in particular is a key one to focus on here, because that's obviously a huge market. It's seen as the great untapped market by basketball, the UK, but really England in particular, because it has large arenas. Manchester and London most notably have huge arenas, but also doesn't have teams that really draw huge numbers of fans. Still very dedicated British basketball fans, but also the culture of basketball in the UK is a bit more broken up. So you've got your people who only care about the NBA, people who only care about the Super League sides, people who are a bit of both. Then there's the British national team. It's all a bit of a hodgepodge of interest in basketball. And the NBA would naturally think there's fertile territory there. There is. But again, the stakeholders in the football clubs, and that's not just the fans, because obviously fans can only have such a loud voice. Although again, in Europe, tends to be more powerful than in the United States. The other investors, the people who are looking at making money, are going to say, well, if we're just taking this money away from our football activity, isn't that going to lower the amount we can spend there and also therefore reduce our league position, which reduces our revenue from league finishing space, and as a result all the other sponsorships that come with it, basically potentially lowering the value of our overall product by trying to diversify into basketball, which isn't necessarily a big sport already. So you've got both the money people and the supporters kind of going, why are you spending money on this? And it's not just the UK, because while multi-sports clubs is far more common across Europe, they're not all the same. Take, for example, Real Madrid. Oh, and we'll be coming back to Real Madrid later in this video, by the way. Real Madrid, very much the one and the same, the basketball club and football club together. Barcelona, all its sports teams, basketball, football, futsal, roller hockey, which I really can't stress enough, you've got to watch together. But then you go to Greece, where Olympiacos and Panathinaikos, two huge brands in Greek sport. But essentially Panathinaikos and Olympiacos as basketball clubs don't operate under the same ownership, never mind management, as Olympiacos football and the other ones. They're all under the Olympiacos banner. Fans are often, more often than not, in fact, fans of both. But the actual ownership structure is different. So again, it's like who's divesting where is a question. And with both Real and Barcelona, money has come out of the football sections to fund the basketball sections. This is well worth keeping a note of for later. So just because you can diversify doesn't mean stakeholders, be they either the fan or the investor, will want to diversify. Basketball is not just going in after basketball fans. And if it is, the NBA really doesn't know what it's doing. Because, well, how should I put this? large cities, like the ones the NBA is looking at, your Manchesters, your Londons, your Parises, your Berlins, your Madrids, those sort of cities, they aren't just sports towns, never mind single sports towns. Like football is the dominant one in all, but there's other sports to compete with for fans, and there's other forms of entertainment. There's lots of things, in fact, to compete with for fans. I'm going to use Berlin as a big example here because you go to Berlin, from sports alone, you've got two top tier football teams. You've got the best men's volleyball team in the country. You might go, that's only volleyball. They get crowds. You've got the best ice hockey team in Germany. Again, they get crowds. And you have Alba, who are great, don't get me wrong. And you got a good handball team as well, who also get crowds. And you go, well, Alba haven't succeeded, but surely that's just because they never had the money to succeed. To which I kind of go, you're missing the point. They have worked very hard and very intelligently at building up a support within the Berlin market. But the Berlin market involves a lot of work because, again, those are just the sports they're competing with. They're also competing with the vast amount of entertainment, the vast amounts of dining. Entertainment euros is what we're discussing here, or dollars if you want. But it's entertainment spend is what we're discussing here. And there is a lot of competition in a city like Berlin for that. London, take it to another level. Paris, quite similar to London. Madrid, again, there is always more than basketball than you're competing with. So if you look at an Alba and say they haven't really broken Berlin, they've broken it probably as well as a basketball team is going to, even if it had an injection of cash greater than Alba has behind it, at least in the short term. And that's nothing to sniff at. Like, these large cities don't necessarily have, well, they have basketball fandom, but they don't have attending large basketball game culture. And you've got to grow that, essentially. Like, Berlin has worked very hard to do it. Madrid gets the supporters in, but again, we are coming back to Madrid in the final point here. And Paris, with its team, has done quite well, but of course, the NBA is considering possibly pairing with PSG, Paris Saint-Germain, which would be interesting to say the least, but again, comes with its own challenges. So just because there's a lot of people, a lot of money in those cities, doesn't mean you can get access to that, because you're not just competing with other basketball. It's not just the logistics of what you already have out there. Your product has to be able to sell something more interesting to them, which now brings us to the last whopper point. The NBA Europe, no matter what it tries, will not be the NBA, and that's a problem for the NBA. So the NBA, the badge is great. The brand is very strong. But you know what helps make that brand strong? Star power. Like, you've got star power both in club histories and the Lakers and the Celtics, the Spurs. You look at it and you go, franchise history, great. But then there's the legends of today and the past who all come together to make it. Like, and you've got, LeBron is not going to play for London, at least not in his prime. Wembanyama is not suddenly going to jump to play for the Paris side. It's like just thinking of the various options. The Wagner brothers aren't going to join the Berlin franchise if there is one. Like, this is the thing. You don't have that star power automatically injected from day one. And that's a huge problem, considering this is meant to be a revenue generator. Like, Basketball Africa League was dealing with somewhat fertile territory in that it had two things going for it. One, the top tier is entirely under FIBA's oversight, but also the top tier was still relatively low in terms of what it was able to do, what it was able to give those top clubs. BAL was able to bring it up another notch. It was bringing it up to a notch that they didn't really get before. But BAL is still, you're talking sub-BCL in terms of what it's giving the clubs. Never mind sub-Euroleague, which is another level again. And so when you're factoring that in, you go, well, what can the NBA offer in Europe? Is it a direct competitor league? If so, well, good luck. And I mean that in the most sincere sense, because look at your prime target EuroLeague club, Real Madrid. They lose tens of millions of euro a season on their basketball department, despite being quite strict on how they spend it. Like, they do not make money. The Real Madrid basketball department has never made money. And the fans are used to winning a lot. Like, this isn't like, oh, we're going to bring them something they've never seen before at Real Madrid. These are Real Madrid fans. They've been going to Real Madrid games a long time. They've been spending money to go see Real Madrid. It's not like Real don't get good crowds. They get great crowds in a very, very nice arena. But they ain't going to suddenly spend more just because the NBA badge is on it. And that's the thing. Like, it's still going to be Real Madrid to them. PSG basketball is like, well, PSG is a very strong handball side. Guess what? That's a lot cheaper to compete in. PSG basketball, you're kind of going, well, it'll be interesting in the Nike versus Adidas battle over Paris, which is one of the more interesting sort of FMCG, well, not really fast moving, but more interesting consumer goods wars going on right now, like for the Parisian market between Adidas and Nike. But that's a bit of a thing. But other than that, you're kind of going, well, either go with PSG, okay, and you got to try and build it up again, or you go with Paris basketball, who have started to actually work at developing a crowd. Good for them. But again, there's limitations on how you can bring that. And you're suddenly going, well, we can't really spend at NBA levels, can we? And you go, you don't need to, right? Well, EuroLeague levels, while not at NBA levels, are quite high these days. And some of the teams even manage to make money. They just don't seem to be in the markets the NBA is looking at. I'm obviously looking at the two Greek clubs, Panathinaikos and Olympiacos, whereas Panathinaikos are actually profitable and Olympiacos are in a position where they could be quite profitable with a couple of minor adjustments. And we do mean minor for the most part. So you're at that stage, you go, right, okay. Your large cities is where you're looking though instead, because of course Athens isn't seen as, and in fact, factually isn't as valuable a market on paper to the media as the larger markets in Europe. That's understandable. Still, though, there's one other small point. Well, this is the last big point. There's one other small point I've really got to bring up, which might actually be really big now that I think about it. Yeah, the US really underestimates just how valuable the US is. And I know that sounds odd in these politically charged times, but what I really mean is US sports organizations don't realize how US geography and culture, and by culture I mean language really, but also government, and I don't mean who's in charge, I mean format thereof, has enabled large sports leagues to thrive. You've got obviously a very large population, which would be comparable to the European Union, I believe, last I checked. But you also all speak English. You have the same nationwide sports networks. You obviously have all your sub ones, but your core overarching ones and you're all under the one federalized system. Now, you could argue the EU is a federalized system as well, but not even close to the level the United States is. And that kind of makes you OP as a media market, like overpowered, in that you have these sub-markets that are very powerful, but also enables huge growth and huge potential to develop very, very strong brands and strong revenue from sports media rights there to a level that you just don't have that same strength in Europe. Like it's not the same culture of spending for something that isn't football, basically, on media rights in Europe. Football will always, by the way, be the dominant force. You are never beating it. You can talk it up, you can do this. Your goal is not to beat football. Your goal is to get a certain share of overall consumer spend. Don't even try and look at football as a competitor, especially given you're going to ally with football clubs. Europe has got a much more disparate media market, much more, broken down, far more language divide. And while like English is the language of this channel, because I'm, a native English speaker, although I'm also a native Irish speaker, the bottom line is majority of Europeans don't use English as overwhelming majority of Europeans, sorry, do not use English as their conversational language every day. It is not their primary source for consuming media. So it's not like you can just go, well, the NBA Europe will be a league in English. It won't be. It'll be a league in multitudes of languages, which will lead to some, differences in how you spread stories and how you're able to sell the story of any NBA in Europe. And you add to that the matter that your rights deals in terms of what that market will consider of adequate value in a Spain versus an Italy versus a Germany will vary wildly. So you're dealing with much, much more complex stuff. And you might go, well, we can just go with a single streamer. Great, but again, you still have your language issue there in terms of story spreading. You've got challenges here, is what I'm saying, and they're far, far more fundamental than haven't mentioned the early politics once. It's like, well, I suppose I loosely referring to in the Basketball Africa League. I haven't mentioned the existing fan base culture outside of Alba once, and even with Alba, it was a case of showing that they have actually succeeded. I have not really touched too hard on fandom here and on existing basketball in Europe. I'm looking at this as even, as things are, even before you get to all the problems that everybody's already talking about, you've got a big challenge. So these are challenges the NBA is overlooking, at least though maybe the NBA isn't, but certainly the discussion around the NBA's moves into Europe are overlooking. And I think we need to talk about them more. So you tell me what else we think, apart from the fandom ones. I get that. Like, I'm hello me, for your regular viewers here. You tell me what you think we should be discussing more when it comes to the NBA's plans for Europe, which maybe isn't being looked at, or even if it is the fandom, fire away in the comments. I welcome all comments. You're all great. If you haven't already, please subscribe. All the likes, shares, you know the drill. It helps more people see what we're doing here. I hope you like the cap. It's the first time it's on the video. I got this on holiday to Switzerland a couple of months back with my buddy Jamie. And in case you're wondering why I'm wearing a shirt, I was doing breakfast television today, telling, this is, recording this the same day it comes out, telling everybody how expensive Valentine's Day is. But you know what isn't expensive? My love for my beloved. Shabangi, baby, you're great. And everybody else, I'll see you soon.